You are listening to an independent production. All additional audio elements were provided copyright-free and belong to their respective owners. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Gateway to Eden podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about firearms and security. Mainly, making sure that our community is safe and sound within wherever we are, because, there's a lot of people who, just because of the nature of what the community is, there are going to be a lot of people who do not want us to exist. There are a lot of people who already don't want us to exist. But today, I am joined by my trusty crew, sans Vickrell, unfortunately. He was busy today helping out family. But with everybody else, introduce yourselves. Bomb Carnivore.
Again.
Yeah.
Technical
There's
difficulties.
no reason it should be doing it.
Technical difficulties.
I just don't have the wherewithal to keep poking at it. I'm Bomb Carnivore. I wrench on stuff. Welder fabricator.
Silver, military veteran, and resident server artist / chef.
I'm Armitage. I'm a military veteran as well as the guy who's writing all of the things.
I'm Raya, I guess. Resident mama?
Fair enough.
Your turn, Mason.
Mason, I'm just here.
Good enough. There we go.
That's literally the only way I can describe this.
All right. And then, as always, everyone is listening. You're on the Gateway to Eden podcast. We have a podcast that we try to do regularly. We are on Spotify. We are on YouTube. You can find links for all of these different socials on my bio, in my link tree. But you can also, like I said, you can find us on Spotify. The more you listen on Spotify, the more our message gets sent out. So, thanks everybody for hopping on and watching.
Glad to be here.
Let's get started. So, like I said, we are talking about firearms and security. We're not talking about, like specific firearms or calibers or anything like that. Just general rules for how we want to secure the community and keep each other safe, basically. And I remember we were talking about, we always have a pre-stream meeting the night before where we talk about various things, and I remember there is going to be some levels of security, I guess, depending on where we are. Everyone, for the general public of the community, there's going to be, you can go almost anywhere and have a key card that'll open up the communal buildings, the community pool areas, stuff like that, basically. And then we also have visitor badges in case anybody wants to come in and hang out.
Yeah, that's going to be big, especially with vendors that will need to, have access to certain specific areas, the command and control of personnel, the command and control of like visitor access, unauthorized areas, and, for like elements of command and control, you're going to need a higher level of security. HR is going to absolutely need to be secured, things like that, because you do not want unauthorized access that violates not only community policy, but it also violates local and federal law.
And as a quick disclaimer on some of this, while we do use a lot of military terms and we're talking about specific things with security and stuff, we are not a militia. We are not anything like that. And we are simply using terms that are knowledgeable or that we have knowledge on, especially since several of us are veterans.
About half the chat, half of the voice chat here are military veterans, myself included. So, yeah, we're gonna bring up those terms a lot because that's what we know. That's what they drilled into our heads for 2+ months in boot camp.
I'm gone.
Did not hear a word you said, Bomb Carnivore. I heard gun, and it sounded like range, but
I are confused.
No, I said I was going to.
And we lost
it cut out again.
Something about
I
drilling.
said it and then it just cuts out.
I don't. We got to figure that out. Discord is.
Bro, it is literally just you that's having this issue.
Bomb Carnivore, check your settings. Go into voice and video and see what volume have it set for automatic, because Discord will automatically pick up your voice.
Is that better?
A little bit.
I'll just switch it to automatically detect input sensitivity. That might help.
There you
Yeah,
go. So much
perfect.
better.
I don't know. I had it turned up because I was using the other mic, and I had the fan going.
And Discord is Discord. So,
Yeah. No, I'm going to undrill those military terms from your head just because I like being annoying.
there we go.
So
now we
much
know what
fun.
you're talking about.
Luck. I still do rifle manual in my sleep, so.
And I go through radio protocols in my sleep as well, so I feel you there.
And what was it? My brother was a radio operator in the Marines, joined after I did, and he was telling me that part of the manual in there is if it's not working, unplug everything, hold it at chest height, drop it, and then plug it in and test it again, and sometimes that works.
Yes, the old percussive maintenance routines.
But like legitimately in the manual, it was saying to do that.
Yep.
Okay, I
and
just had
when in doubt, lick it. That's serious.
I was about to say, what the heck? And then I remembered back to my own training with nuclear reactors, where we are literally trained in some cases to just hit it with a wrench.
Percussive maintenance is always a
that's-
valuable exercise.
Not stressful.
Oh, yeah, I know. Especially
Just
not
what?
on nuclear
10
reactors. Anyway, a little bit off topic, sorry. Going back to firearms and security, where we were talking about vendors having access to specific areas, and
Yes.
I do like that idea because, like, and the majority of these security implementations are to protect our community, not anything else. It's just purely to protect us because, especially with the current political climate, people are probably not going to be fond of a commune, basically. And I know it's not a commune, it's a co-op, but public perception is everything. And if the public
Exactly.
sees it as a commune, it's going to be labeled as a commune.
One idea of what we can do for security is have a sequestered dock so we can load and unload trucks without them coming on to the community proper.
I mean, we're probably going to need something like that anyways because, the majority of the design for the community is going to be walkable too. More pedestrian friendly than vehicle friendly. So,
Well, and the first thing in security is we're absolutely going to have an on-site threat assessment. So that is something to keep in mind throughout all of this. Is regardless of where we end up and where we go, the first thing we're going to have to do in regards to security is a threat assessment and a site map. So threat assessment, site map, and we are going to have to establish, okay, here's what we're looking at, here's what we're doing, what do we need to protect?
Right.
And how do we go about protecting this without making everybody go through 1984 badge in, badge out, everything?
Exactly. So we have to balance both security and efficiency in the assessment documents. I'm actually currently working on security policy right now, so that's a good thing. Being able to balance that in such a way that we're not impeding residents, members, employees, vendors, so much so that we create a larger problem for ourselves than just, keeping security at an awareness level to the point of, hey, here's what we need to do, here's how we need to do it. This goes a little bit beyond that and we start getting into the realm of balancing efficiency in what we're trying to do with work crews, what we're trying to do with, residents, getting food out, getting, training and entertainment put in. We're going to need to balance efficiency and ease of access with what we desire as a community overall.
Yes. The whole thing of all of that is learning where the cross section or the crossover, that point between being security conscious and just being a lockdown state. We don't want that. We want people to be safe and happy and healthy, but to have access to whatever they need.
Exactly. And departmental access too, because that was one of the things that we had brought up was, there are going to be certain areas that would be considered mission critical dropping back into term, that would be considered restricted access that we don't want, like, say, one of the kids runs around and goes and plays in the, electrical room. We don't want that to happen. So there is a safety element in that is designed for preventing unauthorized access by untrained, unauthorized individuals that could potentially damage or cause harm of some kind, which we do not want in any form or fashion.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm pretty sure that when carnivores wrenching away on things, he wouldn't want kids trying to throw his wrenches around.
Get children thrown around.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially next to the giant deuce-and-a-half military trucks, various other giant pieces of equipment, especially hers,
Sometimes-
backhoes, all of that fun stuff. Sorry, what were you saying?
That's not to be said. We won't have times for, hey, we've made it safe. Have the kids come out and check this stuff out, climb on it, have fun.
Oh, exactly. It's just like
Yeah.
when we're doing stuff that's incredibly
Stay alone.
exactly like they're like there's training days and stuff like that we factor in. Quote unquote, bring your kid to work day. Things like that. It's one of those where it's a reasonable control for specific areas.
Yeah. Stuff like apprenticeships too, pardon me. So, and it's not, and yeah, I don't know where I was going there.
No, but we will need to make, because we also want it to feel like a community, not a prison.
Yeah.
Or a
And I
port
mean, like,
with a skiff.
And I mean, like, speaking of that part, a lot of the places that we're looking at and the kind of property that we're looking at is kind of, out in the middle of the woods. So actually getting to the community and getting into the community is going to be regulated, just naturally regulated to the access roads that we build. So, I mean, yeah, technically you could tramp through the woods to get to us, but how likely are you?
And you do that, you're going to be leaving a vehicle by the side of the road that people are going to notice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing is we also have to plan for the human element as well. Because that's like, in my time in the military, that was the largest obstacle that we had to plan against, we had to train against.
Just getting some dude wandering up with a clipboard and a Otis T-shirt, for example. Oh yeah, I'm here to fix your elevators.
We don't
You
have
would
any
not believe,
elevator.
as a forklift field technician, the amount of access I get to warehouses and buildings is absolutely insane. Nobody checks. Nobody's like, wait a minute, let me call your office and make sure you are who you say you are. They're like, oh, thank God, you're here to fix the forklift. And just let me in.
Well, it's like in my work.
A van full of tools, a forklift company sticker on it, the T-shirt, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he is. Clearly, he is who he says he is."
Almost like in the electrical industry, we had a rash here recently where people were impersonating us with branded uniform articles, and they were gaining access to places where they shouldn't go.
That's not good.
You would not believe how easy it is for someone in a hard hat and a reflector vest to access
clipboard.
areas that they should not be in.
With a clipboard and an iPad, and you can get in just about anywhere.
Or a
Not
ladder
me doing
in a
exactly
jumpsuit.
that. Oh, we've got a chat from Darkmaster King asking me, "Are you the real one?" Not yet. I'm not the real Joseph Seed yet.
I gotta make the business plan for that. Hang on.
Oh no!
Here we go.
Just remember,
Legally
we
changing his name.
cross the line into overly religious. There will be internal sabotage.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Or just problems in general.
Suddenly we got a deputy and crew coming up into the middle of one of our services.
No.
The only thing I'm doing at that point is going, oh no.
Shit, guys, here we go again.
If that happens, I'm packing up my stuff and heading. Yeah, if that happens, I'm just packing up my stuff and I'm heading straight for the nearest bunker. I'm just closing it behind me. You all can deal with that.
As long as you activate the only you protocol on your way in.
Nope, muting everything. I ain't hearing nothing. You guys are gonna have to cut through 6 feet of solid steel and concrete to get to my ass. I am not dealing with that.
No, we're either just
not
gonna
to
put a
do access
GPS
force.
tracker into my neck so that if they pull me off of the property for too long, code will go out and only you starts playing. Either that or I have to input a dead man switch code every 24 hours or something.
All right, so back on topic.
Yeah. That's a joke, by the way, everyone watching. That's
Yes,
a joke.
absolutely.
It better be.
But going like Silver is saying, going back to the topic at hand. I remember we were talking last night during the pre-stream meeting also about having various additions to security, like specific types of RFID cards, because there's more than just the basic RFID that you can, spoof with your phone or stuff like that. Because the higher levels you go, you can add more encryption. And we were also talking about coupling it with a code that you use with the card, storing cards in specific areas so that we don't have to rely on people, putting it in their pocket and not losing it and stuff like that for, electrical areas, administration areas, and various other.
I do have a solution for losing credentials.
Okay.
Implants.
Yeah, that sounds dangerous.
Biohack.
It's biohacking. I watch a lot of Deviant, and he has an RFID implant in his hand where it's not going to hurt him, and he can just walk up to an RFID scanner and walk it. And assuming the badge is authorized, just walk right in.
Sounds interesting, but I'm gonna pass on that one personally. If we're gonna do something like that, I'd like to do like maybe a bracelet or something like that.
See, and I think a bracelet would be easier to manage, particularly in the aspect of what we're going to be doing work-wise.
We're smart. The materials you could do like Kevlar braids. That's not gonna cut or rip off, but we could set it up with a quick release. So if we need to take it off, we can.
I'm
Exactly.
going for an implant because anything hanging off my wrists is a liability in my line of work.
If you're
Fair
okay
enough.
with an implant, we can go with an implant.
Assuming I can find an implant that is compatible with the technology we decide on.
Right,
There-
right. Well, my luck would be that if I got an implant like that, the covering or shielding would fail, and then like I'd have to get like a defibrillator or something like that, and it'd just fry anyways. So
That's
Father,
that's fair.
someone has
Oh,
followed the
No
project.
implants for silver.
someone has followed the project. Dark Master King has followed the project. Thank you, Dark Master King. So, but yeah, when it comes to implants like that, the implants themselves are about as versatile as the RFID cards and such. It's really there's not really any different technology that goes into it. But like I said, if you don't want an implant, you don't have to get an implant. We'll go with the bracelets. But I can see why Bomb Carnivore would want one because, working on tools and equipment and big stuff that, if your bracelet gets caught, it'll deglove your entire hand. You don't want to see one of those. I've seen that before. It's not fun.
You get degloved if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to...
As long as it's not electrically conductive, I'm typically good to go because that's another thing that you have to worry about, particularly when you're dealing with electrical, is arcs jumping. So that's something we may have to take into consideration as well, especially for those who are working on the electrical side of things, is whatever access we decide to go with, we will definitely need to counteract additional hazards, particularly in arcs.
like implantable lightning rod sounds horrible.
I concur.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to have fun anymore.
I don't want to be turned into the literal
Well-
incarnation of Sparky.
That's fair. Okay. But only to assuade, is that the right term?
Assuage?
To help you feel a little bit better, RFID implants they're energized
That
by
way?
the electrical field of the scanner. So it's not like they have any batteries or anything like that you have to worry about.
But there is a copper coil for an antenna so it can receive power.
And
From
it's
the
just this
scanner
tiny little bit
to-
of power that is no more powerful than a static shock.
Doesn't sound like the type of energizer that I want to deal with.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm sitting here thinking I'm about to be a lightning rod.
Anyway, going back, I mean, I'm fine with getting an implant like that. But going back, like I was saying earlier, like I mentioned, we were talking about, storing certain access cards in a secure place so that, if Armitage, if you're going out and working on the power station that we have, you can just go over, put in your code, grab the key card, and go to the power station. And then I think it was you, Silver, who talked about having a one-time emergency code for the event of, like, we have to get in there right now.
Yes, there'd be like it's a one-off emergency code. So if we had like key code or keypad access to things for in the event that we can't get a hold of the person who should have the master key for the day, like an OOD, which I'm sure we'll get to later, or the person who has the access is currently inside and we can't reach them, or, God forbid someone has a heart attack or is medically incapacitated, to get into these areas to help them.
Yeah, and that one-time code, I know we were discussing the way that you get access to that one-time code. If I remember correctly, we did speak about this one-time code being specifically generated, recorded, and the reasoning for access being recorded, so that way after the fact of the emergency, we can go through, we can basically do an after-action report or an after-action autopsy and go through, figure out what was done right, what was done wrong, and how to prevent situations like that happening again.
Yeah.
We're going to have a procedure for everything. SOPs, standard operating procedures. Sorry, go ahead, Silver.
I was going to say the idea behind that would be that for correcting issues that we come across, stuff like that, like what I was saying with the officer of the day kind of thing, RD, is you have one person who is in charge of security for that day. It's a 24-hour rotation with 3 or 4 people on the roster, so that way nobody gets burnt out or easily compromised. Set them up so that way they have access to emergency information, a binder that's got like key cards or a list of codes to get into any particular area, or one master code to get into everything. And at the end of that 24 hours, that code is either rotated out or made invalid, so that way it can't be misused or lost.
I
Yeah,
like that
that's
idea
good.
of consistently having a code that changes. I don't know about invalidating it, because then we could probably use it again, because, like, if it's a 4-digit code, there's how many 100,000 possibilities?
Well, and the key with the rotation of the code, the key with the rotation of the code is it doesn't establish a pattern, right? Because
Yeah.
when you're doing things like red team or opposition force simulation, the reliance on patterns and routines is typically where we end up getting screwed up, especially when it comes to terms of security and things like that. Because it's like when you play a video game, all of the NPCs that you're going up against have a specific pattern that they use until you're detected, and then now it's absolute chaos. We're looking at Far Cry 5 as a particular example. There is a pattern to every encounter. It's just picking up that pattern is what allows us to get in.
Well, what you're getting into with specifically is operational security. If you have a predictable pattern of behavior, something that can be observed and studied, weaknesses can be created or at least noticed and exploited. Yeah. So being sure that we're paying attention to, don't walk the same path every time, but make sure that you're doing a full check on everything type stuff.
And particularly with mission critical areas, human resources areas that have proprietary and confidential information that is designated by the LLC structures, that's where not establishing a pattern or establishing a pattern of codes for access will become key.
Exactly.
It's a complicated subject.
Yeah, especially when we don't know exactly the layout and how we'll be doing everything.
Exactly. And the policies that I'm writing can only deal with situations that I'm aware of, which is why we have mechanisms for updating and adapting policy later on down the line. But it's all going to be dependent on the setups. It's going to be dependent on the systems we have in place, and it's going to be dependent on essentially where we're going to be at, what we're going to be doing, local, state, and federal laws.
Our security system is going to be air-gapped from everything.
Yes.
Because, God forbid, somebody fishes in, uses a phishing attack, and gets hacked servers and the like. We can't have that getting compromised.
Yep. And social engineering is an extremely powerful tool when it comes to compromising server infrastructure and security infrastructure.
Exactly. We can't be letting, like, we're going to have to verify that people are who they say they are.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on for the podcast for a sec. And fortunately, you know, a lot of these background checks and ensuring that people say are who they say are, at least for community members, we will be doing that, you know, as they join the community. I don't want to
Absolutely.
gatekeep anybody, but at the same time, you know, this is about security, keeping everyone safe within the community. So if one person is not, you know, following those safety regulations, we can't exactly ensure the safety of everyone else.
Exactly. On top of that, doing the checks and even going so far as background checks, we need to make sure that we're not accidentally inviting somebody into our midst who shouldn't be there. Not saying that we're expecting, you know, bad actors or anything like that, but at the same time, there are people out there who, once they find out about us, are going to want to do harm.
Yeah, that's where that is exactly where social media vetting, that is where a digital footprint vetting, and that is where the background checks are going to come in a very stringent process to make sure that, you know, yes, they are who they say they are. They do not initially intend to do harm to the community. And, you know, it's to essentially verify the integrity of our community and the systems that we have in place to make sure that, yeah, this is going to last not just for a year, but it could potentially last, should we so desire, planning for the next 10,000 years, you know, the longevity and sustainability.
Fingers crossed. Like if we could build something that does indeed last that long, that's going to be amazing. Personally, I think that's going to be amazing.
I'd be happy if we can get it to the 250-year mark.
We'll be alive at that point, so.
But also at the same time, like, the only constant is change. So,
Yep.
I mean, I don't expect this. I don't even expect this to last forever. I just hope that it lasts for the rest of my life and the rest of my children's life. Hopefully.
The growing methodology that I'm discovering is we are essentially planting a tree that we will never be able to sit under the shade of, but our children and our children's children will be able to relax under.
That's the idea.
Yep.
I love the very bold assumption that most of us will have children.
I mean,
let's be real here.
Well, okay, but Raya
Whether we have
already
them
has
ourselves
kids.
or adopt them.
Raya already
there's some
has
people
kids.
here that already have some. I find that it's the direct assumption I just find funny.
But it's like, Armitage, don't you have kids already?
I have two, yes.
Yeah. I know Raya has kids. My partner currently has a child, too. I say currently like it's going to change. I'm sorry. My partner has a child as well, and we have talked about, you know, potentially having more, too. So, like, and then it's not just us here in the podcast. It's everyone who's part of the community. There's probably going to be, I'm estimating, like, at least a quarter of community members either have or will have kids, depending on how big we get.
And children
Which is
of the heart
something else.
too.
Something else with security on that is making sure that we are, in fact, protecting the kids, making sure that we're not worried about outside people or even inside community, which is why we're doing background checks and vetting people and watching things. There will be standards that we have to follow that we will stringently follow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No exceptions.
And that gets into leadership culture as well. You know, this is something that for those of you who are listening, those of you who are watching, understand that this is, you know, going to be a leadership driven thing, meaning that the leadership is held to extremely high
Same
levels of
standard.
accountability. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say the high accountability, but the same standard as everybody else. If everybody else is getting the background checks, so we are. So are we.
Exactly.
If there's required training, we're getting it too. If there is anything going on, the difference between a boss and a leader and being community leaders like we want to be is to lead from the front. You lead people, you don't direct them.
Exactly. Leading from the front, leading by example.
Holy crap. Okay, so we're already at 40 minutes. I apologize for the sudden, you know, like, sudden U-turn or something. But we're already at 40 minutes, and I do still want to talk about firearms and firearms safety within the community, too. because that does kind of go hand in hand with the security aspect.
Yes.
So, and to preface this part of the conversation today, everyone here, big supporter of Second Amendment rights. And I can speak for myself personally, as supportive as I am towards the Second Amendment, there is still a responsibility that comes with said amendment that you need to be prepared and be capable of doing. Because, everyone and their mother, when it comes to the Second Amendment, says, hey, the Second Amendment is there in the event of a tyrannical government. And, especially right now, there are a lot of people saying, hey, that's a tyrant in the presidential seat. And yet, a lot of the people who support him, who are Second Amendment gun nuts, aren't doing anything.
I'm feeling real called out right now.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But also, at the same time, Bomb Carnivore, do you support him in the presidency?
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
No.
So there is a difference between, the stereotypical gun nuts that we're seeing with Second Amendment and people who actually support the Second Amendment, which I consider all of us in this podcast to be, because we understand, all the stuff that comes with the Second Amendment.
And there is a very clear difference between a gun nut and someone who responsibly supports the Second Amendment. And a lot of that boils down to responsibility to others and responsibility to yourself and responsibility to those you hold dear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Part of that is going, like what we're in action in the community, we're going to institute a requirement that if you want to carry a weapon, you have to receive training and be evaluated. And I know a lot of folks are worried about psychological evaluations, especially veterans, because we have our damage, we have our problems, and some folks honestly do not need to be openly wielding a weapon in some capacity. We don't need somebody who is not, for a lot of way of saying it, sound mind or battle ready to be carrying a weapon
agree with you, Mr.
around
C.
people. There's a whole run of things that could go wrong with that, and this community is going to be under a lot of scrutiny, and we do not need to have somebody push us in that direction.
I absolutely concur. And as a veteran, I will be the first to hand in anything I've got if I fail a psych eval.
Same.
That is not something I'm willing to risk.
There is no shame in that at all whatsoever. If you are not sound, that does not mean you can't be made sound. There's therapy, there's options, and there is no shame in going that way.
And I mean, that is one of the things we're trying to focus on too, not just, having community to fall back on, but also being able to get that therapy, being able to better your life through this community too, in any way, basically, whether it be job training, therapy, stuff like that.
And that's
we
the
all
other
could
thing.
use therapy, regardless of your current mental health status. Therapy never hurt anyone.
Agreed. And that's the other thing, is removing that stigma as well. That's the thing, is you have taken the utmost responsibility to yourself, your community, those you hold dear. There is no shame in any of this. There is no issue with any of this. It's quite simply boiling down to, you have done the utmost thing to protect those you care about. And if anything, that is to be honored and respected.
It is a commendable action in and of itself, for sure.
And, and mind you, we're a whole, at least half of us here are veterans, and all of us are saying, look, we fit the societal definition of, what you would call, high speed, low drag. We're all very much responsible in our regards, but we're sitting here saying, hey, if I'm having an issue, I will take the lead on this as a veteran, instead of being irresponsible and negligent and risking everything that I've worked to build, everything that I care about. I'm going to make the first step in healing, and that is removing the danger that I would present to others around me.
Nobody wants to be that zombie apocalypse survival person who gets into a place with a bite because they don't want to talk about it.
Exactly.
I mean, we are doing the zombie apocalypse thing, but that's just a joke because of the video game we're playing off of.
Yeah, because the CDC recommends that you should prepare for the zombie apocalypse.
It's smart.
The CDC legitimately recommends that you should prepare for a zombie apocalypse. Because they
do have
figure
a-
if
they do
you're
have a
ready for
plan.
the zombies, you're ready for the vast majority of other natural disasters.
Okay, fair. Okay, that makes sense then. Because I was about to say, the only time I've seen a quote-unquote realistic zombie virus has been from Andy Weir, the guy who wrote The Martian. He actually had a series of short stories where one of them was a scientist who engineered a virus that actually had similar symptoms to zombies.
Ew. No.
Yeah. It wasn't creepy, but it was actually very interesting how he broke it down. I love Andy Weir as a writer because, you know, he still does science fiction, but he does realistic science fiction in a way that, you know, oh, the science makes sense. This is entirely plausible. So, but that's a little off topic, I apologize. So, going back to firearms, like Silver was saying, everyone's going to be trained. And those levels of training are, like, I believe we were talking about, those levels of training would vary depending on, you know, what types of firearms you're using, what types of things you're going to do with them, like whether they're hunting rifles as opposed to assault rifles or anything like that. Because, you know, there is always the potential that we may need to hold our ground for any reason. Not to again, we are not a militia, we are not anything like that. But, you know, Waco, Texas, Ruby Ridge.
Yeah, that's another thing we have to think about is environmental as well, because I mean, if we're dealing with hostile wildlife, that's another thing that we have to think about is there is very likely going to be a need for a certain level of standing ground, particularly when it comes to like dealing with large carnivores, not you, bomb carnivore, but large carnivores of feline nature.
Mountain lions.
Bobcats.
Mountain lions, danger floofs, bears is another thing that there may
just
be
give them
no other choice.
cheeseburgers.
You
No.
just coming out over and over again saying, no, not you.
I have specifically excluded you from this particular portion of the assessments.
I have to do with this.
But being in the northern side of the hemisphere, you have migration that we have to worry about, and
Moose.
the walking tank with horns,
God, moose.
Dinner for a family of 70.
or an orca.
Natural predator is the freaking orca whale.
What?
Have
Yeah.
you not heard that? It's true.
The moose's only natural predator is an orca.
That's a
So-
How?
statement.
So they can swim, and they can swim at deep enough depth to go after certain underwater plants, right? And in the bays where they can access open water, orca whales can get to them, and an orca will straight up eat a moose if given the opportunity. And now that's something you know. Have fun with that fun fact.
I love the fact that moose are eaten by orcas because that is the most what in the heck is this?
What the fuck?
You Googled it, didn't you?
You didn't know this?
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't disbelieve you, Silver, but again, still, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Welcome to the world of wildlife nerds.
Awesome. But yeah, hunting rifles, I support, everyone being able to everyone in our community being able to hunt, because I know, the locations we're looking at are fairly remote compared to, being right next to the city. Yeah, we are going to be I would like to be close enough to a quote unquote major city so that, in the event of medical emergencies or anything like that, we can still stabilize them on our commune co-op, but there still might need transportation to a hospital.
Stabilization does not equal treatment. That means
That is-
you're not going to die right now.
right
That's
now.
all that means.
It's emergency medical treatment to get them to licensed medical physicians that can actually treat the issue and go beyond stabilization.
Yeah.
Any of the first aid medics CPR training is purely stabilization. Even advanced combat lifesaver training is stabilization to get them to medics and medical facilities in order to have them treated and maybe not restored, but at least put back on 2 feet without any danger to their life in the immediate sense.
Yeah. So
Speaking of training and stuff, and going back to firearms specifically, the general idea, and I think everybody here is in agreement with that, that in order to possess a weapon on the property, you will be required to go through a training course. And for those who want to help participate by participating in like security operations, having people that are actually, part of daily watches and stuff like that, will be required to go through specific training for that. And we're not talking like boot camp or anything massive, but we need to make sure that anybody who is going to be entrusted with security and everything like that actually knows how to do that, proper escalation of force, stuff like that.
So, part of the training should be, if you're going to be using a firearm, you should know how to treat firearm-related wounds and injuries.
That too.
Exactly. That's
If you-
going to be
Using the cordless hole puncher is all well and good. Knowing how to solve a problem when it's an accident or negligent discharge or somebody intended harm, you still need to save lives.
Yep.
yes.
And then there's a whole other thing about the individuals who intentionally cause problems or maliciously injure somebody or something like that. The idea, I think, right now is that if anybody crosses a line and malice or the intent is provable, then there will be immediate and severe repercussions. This is not something that we play around with.
I'm actually in that section of policy writing it right now, and it is severe.
Now,
Yeah.
if it's an accidental thing, accidents happen, but we're going to be doing investigations and stuff like that. It's not something we're just going to blindly do.
we're going to do investigations. We're going to assess the situation and essentially have a debriefing of, what happened, why it happened, how to, prevent it from happening again. Because you can't plan for everything. And I know I'm preaching to the choir right now. You can't plan for everything. So, when something like that does inevitably happen, we have a way to, create a plan off of it. God forbid anything like that happens.
Yeah,
Right.
and it is what I would definitely classify as a worst case scenario. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's in safety, there's a very specific theory called the pyramid theory, that for every 5 near misses, you are risking having 1 severe case. At 10 near misses, you are having a fatality incident that we will have to address. And that is something that we want to prevent by starting at the very base foundation of the incidents. That is the near misses, things like negligent discharges, flagging is going to be another big deal that counts under the near miss protocols. Anything malice is instantly upgraded to a severe case that we are going to have to address.
And just as a side note, if I personally witness somebody flagging somebody, especially if it's intentional, your weapon will be taken from you violently and action will be performed upon you that may or may not require further medical attention.
Agreed. That like in my world, from you were Marine, I was Army. I have seen, and I have run all the way across the range to deal with somebody who was flagging somebody negligently. That is not.
As a civilian shooter, I have left ranges more than once because somebody flagged somebody else. Nope. You're going to do that to one person, I'm gone.
And if that RSO is not dealing with it, that's an RSO issue that will also be dealt with as well. Which, for those of you who don't know, an RSO is
Range safety officer.
range safety officer. Yep.
The person that tells you to get the fuck off the range if you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Speaking of speaking of range safety officers and such, I think we've talked about multiple times having a range of our own on the property. So, that's obviously where we're going to be doing a lot of the training, a lot of the safety briefings and such. and ensuring that people are not only trained but also capable of implementing that training and maintaining that training.
Yes, and that is another thing is this training that we're talking about, the briefings and stuff. The training, any training that is issued does require an annual renewal. That is something that I personally am going to be very, very, very hard about is if you are training, you've got an annual renewal that you have to do in order to do the skill checks and in order to verify that your training from last year is still being kept up with. This is not a one-off thing. There are certifications that are required in order to do things. Because, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, and part of that is identifying deficiencies. So if an individual has a specific repeated issue, we can do training to fix that so they aren't a weak spot for that particular issue.
Yes. And it targets specific deficiencies that allow us as a community to continue to support and develop each other as both community members and professionals.
And of course, there will also be some people who just are not a good fit for security. And while they will not be welcomed back into the security team, we'll find other places for them.
Exactly. And this is all about adaptation.
If you're not cut out for this, you're gone. No, not everything is for everybody.
Not every tool fits the specific job. Sometimes you find somebody who works better as a hammer versus a wrench.
Yeah.
And that's where the development protocols come in, which is probably going to be an entirely separate podcast dealing with HR and policy like that. And that's the thing is we are building this to adapt.
We want it to be safe. We want everybody there, and we need it to be able to handle everyday life, the changes, the switch ups, everything. So we're not just rushing into this. This is a full-on thought out. We want to make sure everybody is safe and happy and healthy, and that is the ultimate goal with everything.
Exactly.
You missed everything, Traveling Gamer. Everything.
Yeah, we're just talking about security for the commune and, firearms for the commune as well, how we're going to treat them. Because, as Bomb Carnivore said, they are cordless hole punchers. They are, yes, I will say they are tools, but the purpose of the tool is to cause damage to whatever it is pointing at. Whether it be a person, a tree, an animal, a wall, anything.
And we need people who are trained to have the judgment to know when and when not to do so.
Exactly. Armitage, I think it was you who said this last night. Your rights end where mine start.
Exactly. Your rights end where mine begin, and
that is
just because you have a cordless hole puncher doesn't mean you can deprive me of my rights as well.
Absolutely not. No. I was taught it. Your rights end at my nose.
Yep.
You're free to live your life how you want, but the minute you try and it's my life, it starts affecting my life. That's when it's a problem.
Exactly. And I think a majority of us in this community have an issue with deprivation of rights in general, particularly regarding the current political climate, especially considering, we all have this, I exist in my bubble. As long as you don't break my bubble, we're okay.
Yeah.
The rights bubble.
Yeah, the rights bubble. All right. I think, do we really have anything else to talk about on this? We kind of covered a lot. We covered a good deal.
We talked about RSOs.
I was going to say there are plans and thoughts, and we are working through a bunch of things. And some of it is going to be obviously open to everybody once we have a better idea on how we want to put it together and implement it. But a good portion of it is going to be kept to a security council because we don't need to put too much information for how we want to keep everybody safe out there. We don't need to give other people a study material for breaching defenses and such.
Oh, sorry. That reminds me. Proprietary and intellectual property security. That is something that I did want to bring up because that is going to factor into a lot of the documentation, a lot of the hardcore plans that we have, and maybe discuss a little bit because of the nature of the specifically some of the documents that I'm writing concern various portions of security and things like that. Proprietary,
considering our entire security system would be proprietary information.
Yes, proprietary information, intellectual property.
I was wondering why we were doing this in the first place.
Try me again, please.
I'm not sure why, if it would be technically intellectual property, but definitely proprietary information.
Intellectual in the sense of how we plan and execute it. The intellectual part would be the implementation in our plans around that. That is our specific plan.
Yeah, and that is something that I wanted to bring up, because if certain bits of information, as all of us who have had security clearances or been involved in skip level security before understand, is that information in itself is one of the most powerful tools that can be used in any particular way in which one may desire, whether that be for the benefit or the harm. And that is something that anything regarding the community, I feel, should have a robust protection in terms of information, proprietary information, implementation, things like that. Because it's not necessarily the stuff, it's the means and methods behind it.
Yes, and that's where OPSEC comes into. We don't talk about stuff in the open. We don't talk about sensitive things with people we don't know or aren't part of the thing, or where people could overhear us. So if we're getting into anything that is excessively sensitive, we do so in a safe space, not in a public forum, like say at a bar because we're having a dinner meeting or something.
Exactly. And keeping your head on a swivel. When it comes to discussing the community in particular, like even I catch myself going through, is this OPSEC? Is this something that I natively understand as, is this a safe place to talk? Is this topic safe? Is this topic safe being exposed at this particular area? Is the parties involved going to use this information for exposure or harm? And should I even be talking about this in the first place?
Right.
I mean, obviously, in some cases, we are going to have to present material, whether it be to the public or inspection agencies, to ensure security. Fortunately, we have two different levels of information that we can / don't have to share with each. So, we're not trying to hide anything, but at the same time, there's only so much we can share with everybody.
Exactly.
The idea is that we're not going to hide anything from anybody who needs to know it. And if there's a legitimate need for them to know, it will be easily accessible to them. But at the same time, we're not going to threaten the security of everybody who's entrusting us with said security by needlessly releasing potentially sensitive information.
Yeah.
And to be clear, community members will have briefings.
Yes.
So
this is not
we
something
do
where we're just going to blanket control something.
And we don't want anybody to feel like they are, at risk of violating a policy or becoming subject to disciplinary action for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
We're not a control state.
Exactly. And that's something that I personally want to avoid.
Like Silver was saying, there's going to be investigations for any accidental things, but we're not going to just throw people out willy-nilly unless, there's a valid reason to.
And that doesn't mean that throwing them out is going to be the only option, too.
Yeah.
There will be levels to things for individuals, depending on the severity and the action and everything else. And of course, if we're not talking about where we're going to jail people or stuff like that. I think expulsion from the community and turning people over to police would be something that we look at doing. But if somebody comes in and they accidentally do something, we might take them off of the security or make them go through remedial training or something like that. But
yeah, I like that idea.
And if I can interject, I do have the possibility of LEO involvement in particularly egregious cases written into the first few drafts, because we do not have the capability, the facilities, or the ability to basically detain and store in the event of severe egregious issues that both breach local and federal law, or reach a level of egregiousness that even we find shocking.
Right.
To deal with the legalese sort of side of things.
And then speaking of civilian rights, specifically for being a citizen of the U.S., you have all your rights. Our community, the property, everything does not supersede that authority whatsoever. But we will have rules and things that go part of that.
Yes, and that was one thing that was brought up, is any of our policies are either going to be at the same level of local and state and federal laws, or superior, right? And this is where we make the distinction of a private entity versus a public entity or state property, or the balancing of private entities' rights versus the rights of the individual as well. And that is something that I think most of us understand. It's just for the clarification portion of things. We also need to understand that this is definitely a private venture, and private ventures do have constitutional rights in addition to the individual, because for whatever reason, the structure of the United States legalese entitles entities to the same, if not superior, rights as the individual person per se.
Yeah. Yeah. I dislike it being a private venture. I would love for this to be, more communal and such, but like you were saying, legalese, the way America is set up, we need to take advantage of that. Just another method of how, we have to work with the current system instead of, just completely disconnecting ourselves from it.
Exactly. We use the system in which we exist, not the other way around.
Yeah, because otherwise we end up like Ruby Ridge or Waco or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, all right. With all of that being said, unfortunately, Mason left before we could do the end credits. But thank you, everybody, for hopping on. We're going to leave everything there. I will have this episode edited ASAP and out because, fortunately, my brother taught me how to actually use Adobe Premiere to quicken my edits and such, and I'm really happy about that. Is there anything you guys want to... Yeah, congratulations. My younger brother is teaching me stuff.
You're learning stuff. That's always good. Doesn't matter who's teaching it to you.
True.
Exactly.
True. All right. Is there anything you guys want to say?
Be open to
Overall,
learning.
yeah, be open to learning. Understand that we're not going to do anything that is going to harm people, and we're not taking away privacy for the sake of security.
Yeah.
In all things, the interest of our community, the interest of longevity, and the interest of security must match up. And, that is something to keep in mind. Is the only thing that this community, this venture is going to do is look toward our best interest as a collective and do whatever we can to make this a reality, make this happen, and get this thing on the road, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I've got one more thing. If anybody has questions about this, feel free to ask. We'll be as open with any of it that we can. Again, we're not hiding anything. We're not withholding information on any level for the community members. If you need to know and you want to know, ask.
Exactly. And with that being said, with that specifically being said, join our Discord. We have a co-op section and specifically a chat specifically for questions and answers related to the co-op, the commune, all of that stuff. So join our Discord. Help out. Not just, actually building it, but also, like topics we need to talk about because, there are currently 5 of us, but it's like 7 of us who regularly do these podcasts. And, even though there's 7 of us, we can't think of everything.
Many faucets makes many perspectives.
Faucets or facets?
Facets.
Okay.
Oh,
God dang it. It's that southern accent taking over.
Anyway, so anything to leave our guests not related to the topic? Like, don't do drugs, kids?
knowing is half the battle.
There you go.
Be safe, be smart.
Don't add to the population. Don't subtract from the population. Don't mess with the wildlife. Be safe. Be happy. And always reach out.
Don't do anything I would do. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't call me for bail. Remember to hydrate.
Take your meds, folks.
There we go.
Hydrate or dihydrate.
Sorry, don't end up in jail. If you do end up in jail, I'm not posting bail. Bonfire Enya is saying, don't trust a man who wears a red hat. I think we all know what that means.
Thank you for saying it.
Oh, commit felonies against the administration.
No.
Maybe not.
No.
Maybe not.
No.
Not encouraging illegal activities.
Okay. That was Traveling Gamer, by the way, everyone. Anyway,
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so glad you spent your Saturday with us. Thank you, everybody from the podcast crew, for spending your Saturday with me doing this. We're going to get this out ASAP. Thank you so much for hopping on and watching and all of that fun stuff. I will see you guys next time. We're not sure on the topic. We're not sure on the
The
schedule.
timing?
Say again?
We're not sure on the timing
The topic.
or timing.
Or timing, yeah. So keep an eye out for that. You know, whenever we do a podcast, it's always going to be on Saturday. It's always going to be over the weekend around 1 p.m. USA Central. Thank you so much for hopping on. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time. We'll all see you next time.
See you then.
Bye! This has been the Gateway to Eden podcast. Please join us again.